Hey everybody, welcome to the 1947 Rise podcast, a podcast that helps India born, US trained Indians get integrated into the Indian technology ecosystem and inspires them to move back to India to build massive tech companies and or help enable the tech ecosystem. We do this by interviewing India born, US trained Indians who have moved back to India and built massive tech companies themselves and or helped enable the tech ecosystem.
Amrit, so excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Shiva. Look forward
Yeah,
to
thanks for doing it. And so let me set the context by reading out a tweet that you tweeted a few days back, and then we can go forward from there. So you said 3 years ago, Sharanya and I moved to India from the US without a plan. All we had were two suitcases, love and optimism for the future. Today, we've built a life and a unicorn company together. Thank you, my very first angel investor. You took a bet on me before anybody else. Amrit, congratulations on the recent fundraise and more importantly, company becoming profitable. So would love to start by you talking about your journey of growing up in India, then moving to US, and then moving back to India.
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks for reading that out. So I grew up in Bhubaneswar, Orissa, which is pretty small town in India in the larger context of things. And after that, I pretty much spent the first 14, 15 years there, and then um, and then really left that environment when I went to IIT Madras to do my undergrad. But even that place was a fairly confined environment. Like we didn't really have much interaction with the city. So though we were in a big city like Chennai, IIT Madras had a very confined kind of college atmosphere. And it used to take like an hour just to get from your hostel to the main gate. So we pretty much stayed within campus. And then spent 4 years at ITC, again in bunch of small towns in India. My first job was in Guntur, first year, then 2 years at Mysore, then one more year at Guntur. And then and that's when I realized that look, I've actually never really lived in a big city in India, and or in a big city ever. So I wanted that experience largely, which is how that thought of even going to the US for me came in the first place. That I'm seeing all my friends growing up in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore seems like a very different experience, and not that I regretted anything, but like the trigger for me to move to the US initially was that like let me just see the world. I think I've not seen much of the world, and hence I landed up for my MBA at Berkeley, which again turned out to be a very small town in the US. Like I didn't know any of this before I went in, and then I graduated and then joined McKinsey in their San Francisco office. So that 1 year which I spent in San Francisco was my first kind of real big city living experience.
Mhm.
I liked the Bay Area a lot overall. I felt like it really changed me both professionally and personally. I think it shortcut maybe 50% of the time that I would have taken to get to that same outcome if I had been somewhere else. Because there's everybody around you was just talking tech, startups, innovation. Everybody had a side gig. As a student at Berkeley, I really, uh, took advantage of my .edu email address and just cold emailed like a bunch of folks saying, "Hey, I'm just a innocent uh, student who wants to understand a little bit more about how you work." And very surprising, 90% of people took my calls back and they agreed to meet with me. So that was how I spent like almost 3.5 4 years in the US. Um, but what was happening for me was while I enjoyed that time a lot, um, and um, and McKinsey was great. Um, I realized that if I had to optimize for staying in the US and specifically with McKinsey, it was a 5 year commitment. Just because of how US immigration is set up, and there's not a lot of mobility that you find uh, with that gig. So at one point, as me and my wife decided that, look, I think US is great, but this is the peak time of our lives. We want to optimize it for doing the right things versus operating in a constrained environment. We also wanted to be closer to family, and we also saw a lot of action happening in India. Like I left in India in 2014, which is I think when the real whole startup ecosystem really took off in a big way, and I came back in 2018 where it was just starting to mature. So for us, it was an overnight decision. Actually, we literally decided over 1 2 like this weekend that, look, we just have to come back, and we have not looked back ever since.
Yeah, so you made the move back. You did not want it to live in uncertainties. And this is the right time where you can take big, larger risks. And when you moved back, Amrit, how was it like, and how did Zetwerk come about?
Yeah, so when both me and Shania moved back, we didn't tie it to a larger decision. The decision was fairly limited that we are deciding to move back. I think that really worked well for us. When you read the tweet that we came back without a plan, it was literally that we just decided that we want to come back and we'll figure out the rest later. And in terms of what that means, we broadly knew that we wanted to operate in the tech slash startup ecosystem, but beyond that, didn't really have that level 2 level 3 plan set up yet. So when I came back, the first thing I did was just started reconnecting with all the friends I kind of grew up with, or worked with at some point in time. And Srinath, my co-founder, was one of the first people I called.
Mhm.
Him and I went to undergrad together. Him and I worked at ITC together for close to 4 years. We already knew each other for close to a decade, and it was just again a massive stroke of luck that while I was in my this phase of life, looking to come back, wanting to do something in tech, he was on the same phase that he wanted to start a company, and obviously we knew each other really well, and we had gone through while we started off in a similar journey, we had gone through a slightly different journey for the last 4 or 5 years, but we again converged that we wanted to do something together. It's just a massive stroke of luck. I can't overemphasize it. Like I don't know
Yeah.
if I would have been able to start a company if Srinath was also not on the same page. And but I mean there is some learning here for sure. Like I have spoken to a lot of folks over the last 2 3 years who are looking to think about this move, and I think people make that decision way harder than it should be, in terms of what will I do here in India, what is that job. They try and figure out all of those things before,
Mhm.
and I mean it's possible, of course, but you're just making it already a hard decision like 10x more harder. I think the thing that I mean of course it's easier said than done, but when I actually came back to India, I had not quit McKinsey formally. Like McKinsey allowed me to take a sabbatical for a few months to figure out, and they gave me the option to come back if I wanted. So I'm not sure, I mean different companies have different policies, but if there are such options where you can just disconnect from that existing role and just fully be present in trying to make this move work, the odds of success are higher.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I love your approach in a sense that, look, you wanted to go all in into, tech slash startup ecosystem. You were open-minded. You didn't know what exactly you wanted to do. And also you wanted to spend some time in India first and then, yeah, make your next move. And of course, I mean, you humbly said that, there was a massive luck, but I'm sure you were prepared for that luck, right? You were planting seed. As you said, you were reaching out to a lot of people. So now you build this, massive company. It's profitable, and it's a great company. But you can't, I'm sure there were times where things were not moving in the right direction, or maybe there were times where you just didn't know. Are we going to continue doing what we are doing? Are we going to figure out something new, or maybe join something new? How was that? Was there a time like this?
like all the time. Especially the first 1 year. Like the first 1 year was a very challenging year for us. Both me and Sharanya moved countries, so we had lived in India for all of our lives, but it was a little bit of a reverse culture shock in the beginning in terms of just getting used to traffic, pollution, and generally, a level of efficiency which we had kind of gotten accustomed to. Just simple things like drinking water from the tap. We do miss that. Um, the second thing was, obviously we started a company which was pretty hectic, time consuming, and third is we also got married that year, in December of that year. So three big changes happening in a relatively short span of time, which in hindsight I would totally recommend, because it's better to get it done in like a shorter time frame than have it like, that's not how we thought about it.
I'll take that advice, Amrit.
Uh, but there were many moments where we felt like, wow, it's just too difficult to, and we were, what the mistake we made, and I would say we are still not fully there yet, is we were trying to adapt our US way of life to India. So, like, both of us kind of were in the US when the whole sharing economy, Uber, Lyft took off. So I never owned a vehicle in the US, which a lot of people do. Like in US, like having a car is a way of life. But when we came back to India, we just tried to manage without it, and it was basically taking an auto every day to work, and using whatever, um, waiting sometimes 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour to get an Uber or Ola. At one point we just realized that, look, this is not working. This is a theoretical construct we have kind of imported. We still don't have any help in the house. We kind of do everything ourselves. We're slowly starting to maybe warm up to the idea that maybe we can change that way of life. But a lot of these mannerisms which we had gotten used to living in the US, where things, I guess, this work slightly differently than India. I think that was one uh, thing that restricted us in terms of adapting to the Indian way of life even more. Um, and we were thinking, man, this is not working. We need to go back. There were many times we've had that thought, but yeah, we stuck it out.
Yeah, and once founded Zetwerk, it's working. So all these things become secondary, right?
No, they are and they're not. Because I think it's important to. I mean, Zetwerk is important to me for sure, but it's not the only thing that's important to me. Having a strong uh, personal life, having a strong marriage, all these things are pretty important to me as well. So we need to make it work across, not just the professional side, but adapting to a new environment, and making it fit and work well is important. So um, it's good that Zetwerk like the success happened around the same time. But I would still say, some of the challenges that we faced when we moved back to India were independent of, Zetwerk doing well.
Yeah.
And especially, some part of the ecosystem is not fully up to date in terms of the most modern practices that exist in countries like US.
Mm-hmm. Good point, Amrit. So, what's like something, either through your experience in US working at McKinsey or interacting with, classmates or professors at Berkeley that you learned in US and you brought it back with you in India, and in hindsight, it ended up becoming something valuable?
Yeah, I think couple of things. So one is, so both combination of B School and McKinsey. I think one personal transformation that I had when I spent these 3-4 years was learning how to work in a highly decentralized fashion. Like my job before this in India was managing a large factory. So you can imagine it is as top down as it gets, because you have to follow instructions because nothing can go wrong. And that's a certain type of kind of management. In the US, both in B school and in McKinsey, everybody was a peer. You literally did not have anyone who you were managing, quote unquote, in the more traditional sense. And the one thing which I picked up was how do you communicate better with people. I think in India, a lot of things are sometimes left unsaid, which I found it pretty refreshing. Sometimes people are too transparent and too to the point. Maybe the right blend is some combination of you know what we do in India versus what we do in the US. But definitely, I had that personal transformation in how to be very crisp and to the point in terms of my communication style, so that things are not left unsaid and things are not left open to interpretation. And at the same time, giving people the space to, once we are aligned, just take that message and give shape to it on your own, right? And being okay with letting go of that control. So because in the US it's a more efficient economy, like the productivity per person is generally higher than what we see in India. And I'm sure India will get there over a period of time, but some of these are more cultural. And but at the same time, it's important to realize that you can't import the US culture to an Indian environment. So it's very important to unlearn some of those things as well, in terms of things that may work in that setting but may not work in this kind of setting. So it's not a one size fit all approach, but there's definitely some crossovers that make it incrementally better.
Got it. And we'll talk about Zetwerk a bit. Amrit, your favorite stories at Zetwerk?
So many of them, like like in the first 1 year, we had I mean, our general approach has been as a company that we don't say no to an opportunity unless it is something completely outside our domain. And what that has meant is a lot of forward-looking kind of commitments that we take a order from a customer. We at the at least beginning, when you're still in that setting up that flywheel of demand and supply, you want demand. Ideally, you already have supply, and or vice versa. You have supply and you want to find demand for that. It's not as linear as that, because you'll get types of demand which you don't have supply for. Do you say no to that? Then it slows down the learning curve. So at the very beginning, our approach was just to say yes to mostly everything, and because of that, we found ourselves in very weird situations. Like one example is we had a customer in Bangladesh, and we were shipping product from India, and somehow, again, none of us fully understand what happened, but somehow the trucks got lost in between the India to Bangladesh, and there's no GPS, there's nothing. So we literally spent like many days trying to locate these trucks, and we found them in some village in Bihar where they had just decided to rest for some time. And in the meantime, our customer was just calling us, "Where is our product? Where is our product?" And we then chaperoned that vehicle from that village in Bihar all the way to the border in Bengal, Bangladesh, and physically had to make sure those trucks crossed the border and reached on time. It was a very stressful period and we were just looking to raise our Series A at that time. So we had to be calm and collected on one front, and that, what do we call, the California duck, where you're calm and collected on the surface, but you're paddling furiously below the. That's literally what was going on. But again, yeah, there's a learning here. Like it all worked out in the end. The today we understand how do we avoid these situations better in the future. And yes, we could have designed it in a theoretical manner, but the maximum amount of learning happens when you're kind of doing it on the job. So today we have a lot of systems and processes to make sure these things don't break the way they did. And it allowed us actually to launch another technology tool which gives customer this visibility on their own, and they don't need to depend on us. So, but yeah, it's been a combination of stress and anxiety leading to learnings.
Yeah, no, and it's all about that journey. And it's funny how, in the moment it feels like a blunder, but in the hindsight, they end up becoming, funny stories, and you end up learning a lot from them. With your, I think Zetwerk is in many international markets. You're growing fast. Where are we today at a high level, if you want to tell or talk about Zetwerk?
Yeah, so we've been around for 3 years now. So we started the company in May 2018, and we just had a 3-year anniversary as a company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's very humbling to see how much progress we have made in this short span of time. But at the same time, when we reflect on where we are, it just feels like the beginning of a massive, massive opportunity. So from a company overall growth point of view, we did around 20 crores of revenue the first year, and last year we did 950 crores of revenue. So in
Wow.
kind of 3-year time period, we have grown a lot. And fundamentally what we do is we take digital designs from customers, and these designs could be for machine parts, this could be for t-shirts, these could be for consumer electronics components, wide variety of industries we serve. But it all starts with a design which is there on a piece of paper or on a software like AutoCAD, and we take that design and we have built that infrastructure to convert that design into a physical product. So it starts with finding the right small manufacturer who has a technical skill set to understand that design and make it. And since these are all custom in nature, we price them ourselves because there's no retail price. You have to figure out the cost of manufacturing and add your margin. And lastly, we solve for complete visibility to the end customer. That because these are long cycles, these manufacturing takes time. It takes 3 months, 6 months. So we give a full tracking solution that yeah, today you place an order, 60 days later your product is shipped, and everything else in between. Like your product is being made, suppliers have bought the raw material, 50% is done. Here are some photos. So we build that infrastructure which works in a very repeated and more consistent manner. So the company has grown a lot from a revenue point of view, but the mix of the company has also evolved a lot. We started doing completely industrials, so it'll be all machine parts, pipes, these kind of products. But as I said today, around 15% of our revenue comes from consumer, which is t-shirts, consumer electronics, earphones, these kind of things.
Mhm.
A lot of these products which you consume, you may not know that they have been made by us, or the supply chain that we have kind of introduced. And especially in consumer, what's happening is there is a massive make in India shift that is happening, because all of these products used to previously get imported from China or wherever. Um, Same thing we are seeing in industrials also. Like almost 15% of our industrials revenue comes from international markets, largely from the US. And again, the shift here is companies are looking to have a China plus one kind of strategy. They don't want to buy everything from one country.
Mhm.
And India is the only at scale economy that can substitute that kind of volumes. Of course, a lot of volumes move to Vietnam and those markets initially, but they will slowly tap out, and companies have to come to India. So, from our vantage point, this is not something we knew honestly when we started the company. We just liked the problem we were looking to solve. But as we look at, sometimes companies are about timing as well, and we just find ourselves at the right place at the right time. We are the only company who can service that type of demand. Like if a new customer wants to explore an Indian market, they don't have too many options, and
Mhm.
and and, uh, and hence we get a lot of inbound. And from that vantage point, this feels like the year zero of a 10-year trend. That and a lot of manufacturing will move to country. A lot of consumer products will get manufactured in India.
In India.
Um, so yeah, we feel pretty excited about where we are.
Yeah, no, things are going for you guys, and congratulations. That's massive, massive growth from 20 CR to 900 CR. And I guess it's just the beginning, and you're creating an entire ecosystem. I think you're also giving loans as well, right, to your customers. It's, it's mostly an entire ecosystem that you're creating. Uh, Amrit, will switch gears. Let's get to know you at a deeper level. Any dark time or failure that set you up for later success.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of skipped some of these things, but like the whole move from the US to India, there was also additional triggers that one was, yeah, we were intentional about this move, but I also did not get my H1B visa in the when I was there in the US. So McKinsey was great. They said, just figure it, just spend some time in other countries till you can apply again. Um, but that whole time period was pretty uncertain because, like, honestly, when I moved to the US the first time, I did not know if it was a one-way ticket or a two-way ticket. I was fairly open-minded about that, but I certainly thought I'll spend at least 4 or 5 years there, and I ended up spending lesser time than that. Um, and while again, I think the right thing to do in these situations is to take control over that situation versus be controlled by that situation. But it was not so obvious when you were in that time period. And while McKinsey offered to help, even McKinsey is a huge company, so there were 10,000 problems they had to deal with. So I just randomly pinged a partner in McKinsey partner in Australia, saying, "Hey, I like your work. I think you have some work projects coming up. Do you think you can take me?" And he didn't have to say yes because he could pick anybody from the Australia office, but he again chose to take a bet on me. And he's now an angel investor in our company also. Name is Nikhil. Um, but uh, but yeah, I mean, again, I feel very lucky that there's been throughout my kind of professional and personal kind of journey, there have always been somebody who's just taken a bet on me when they did not have to. Um, and um, and yeah, like even in my first job at ITC, my first boss was this person called Sanjeev Rangras. He was the CEO of that agribusiness division, and I was reporting to him from kind of day one, which today is highly unusual. Like I don't think a lot of people who graduate fresh from college have an opportunity to report to a CEO of a company which makes $1 billion in revenue. And he takes you up under his mentorship. Um, he didn't have to do that, but it was important to him, and he's also an angel investor in our company. So I feel fortunate that I've had my paths have crossed with generous people in my life, so that whenever things have been not so easy or things have been kind of difficult, they have come in and kind of provided that shield that look, life happens, but here we are. And that's very important to me as well. Like I try and pay it forward as much as possible. So I try and be very generous with my time. Um, and um, and a lot of folks cold email me and reach out to me on LinkedIn. I try and respond to every one of them, because I've kind of been through that journey myself. I think I mentioned this earlier. Even at Berkeley, just I used my student email ID to mail and ping random people, and 90% of them took my meeting, and they led to a lot of serendipitous outcomes. At US, I interned at two venture funds. One was Foundation Capital, and the second was Monsanto's corporate venture capital. It all happened through just cold meetings. It was not they had a program or you to apply. So I feel my entire kind of journey has been a combination of what seems random, but there is a lot of method to that randomness. And yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I would just encourage everyone to just ask. There's no worst cases, you'll get a no, which is okay.
Yeah, no, I think luck is not coming to you. You're creating luck yourself, and you're doing that by being very proactive. Plus, you're trying to plant seed with as many good people as early as possible, right? You're creating luck for yourself, and you're also creating luck for people who are betting on you, right? I'm sure they've made a lot of money by writing that angel check into Zetwerk. Awesome. And Amrit, like, when let's say things are not working out or you're feeling overwhelmed, unfocused, do you have any frameworks that you use which kind of like puts you back on track?
Yeah, it's a more subconscious framework, I would say. I'm just naturally wired to handle stress and uncertainty slightly better than a lot of people I know. One I think first thing is to just acknowledge the situation, that this is not ideal. It hasn't happened to you. I think it's very important to not feel victimized, but take that time to process those feelings. Take a few days, take a week, whatever. Like when I didn't get my H1B, I took my time to figure out, okay, what is the alternatives that I have in front of me. Second thing is to always have this belief deep down that it is a setback, not it's a temporary setback. That's it. Life is long, and there will always be opportunities to make it better. You may not have the perfect outcome that you thought you wanted, but there will always be plan B, plan C's. Then figure out what those plan B, plan C's are, and just work backwards and make sure figure out what are those steps that you need to get to reach that plan B, plan C, and then just show multiple shots at target. That's it. Like when I mentioned the McKinsey example, I reached out to this partner in Australia. I reached out to partners in Europe. I reached out to partners in Singapore. I reached out to like a lot of people, and 9 out of 10 said no, we can't help you. But one guy said yes, and that's all. That's all I needed. I needed only one person to say yes. And similar thing with venture. When you're raising capital, it's when we raised our seed round. Um, the business existed just on paper, so we had to essentially convince folks to take a bet on us, and some people did, some people did not. It's okay. And our journey is very interesting. Like today we have like in our cap table we have Sequoia, Axel, Lightspeed, um, three of the best early stage funds in India. Sequoia did our seed. Axel said no to us during our seed, but they did our Series A. Lightspeed said no to our Series A, but they did our Series B. So again, there's a lot of kind of personally, it's been interesting for me to see because there's no closed doors that way. There is only timing, and just because something did not work out sometime in the past does not mean that it will not work out today. And hence having that discipline to not take it personally, having that discipline to have multiple shots at target. I think that's the number one thing that can help anyone get out of like a not a favorable situation. And there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And if you believe that, then it will happen and it will manifest.
No, it's a really, really solid framework. I think you're really, really focused on, on the process. You're not really much focused on the outcome. At the end of the day, it all comes down to, the processes that you have. And Amrit, like, have you read any books around it, or any practices that you're doing that have really like shaped the way you're thinking about things? What you just described.
Yeah, there are some books I've read which passively do guide these philosophies. There are some books which I wish I had read when I was younger, and I'll give one example, couple of examples of both. So so on the books that I have read, they kind of fall into two three categories. One is your I love these these business books like Zero to One, The Hard Thing About Things. I think they really capture the journey of an entrepreneur. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, like I read these books long before, just this it's a very solid framework in terms of how to build a business. Like Zero to One, for example, is all about finding niches in the market, and being the only company which solves that niche, and then use that niche to grow, and that's exactly what we've done. Like when we started the business, custom manufacturing, people were like, "What are you doing? Like it's must be a tiny market," and the niche we were targeting was a small market. We were doing steel fabrication, but using that we built relationships with so many customers, and we have expanded into multiple other in a portfolio that they can that is addressable. So I'm a big fan of those books. Those folks who have been there, done that, and I try and stay up to those type of content, like high growth handbook, these kind of books. Second is I love reading science fiction a lot, and again it's not very cut and dry that I read science fiction to imagine the future or something, but it helps to sometimes think about new things which you have not thought about at all. And look at Diamond Age is one of my favorite books.
Mm-hmm.
And because science fiction is not just about technology, but about how society can evolve in the future. And some of those things you already see today, though they may not be as widely spread out, but those concepts exist in a smaller setting. And the last set of books is I love reading a lot of biographies, and again it helps to kind of walk through a person's life and just put yourself in that situation of what you would have done. There are things you may have done differently. There are things you may have done the same. Um, the second set of books, which I wish I had read earlier, which I did not have the chance to do so, were just how to spend your 20s. I think there's a lot of content around that, which I kind of went with the flow, where the thinking at our when I was in my 20s, and I'm just turned 30, so don't think was it. But this the thing of 20s was to just be very kind of exploratory minded. That your 20s are for exploring, and your 30s are to plant seeds. And while I do agree with that broadly, I do think that the earlier you have things figured out, the more life can compound for you. And the 20s are a great time for that. Like, while I wouldn't take nothing away from my journey, but I did not really need to go to the US to start a company in India, which is doing something in a very traditional industry. And the roots of what I'm doing now came from my first job at ITC, which is I was building a new factory for them. So yes, I took a detour and came back to those roots. If I had figured it out earlier, you know, I would be in a different stage in my life at this point in time. Same things about marriage. Like I feel while I got married 2 years ago at just turned 30, me and Sharon have been dating for like 10 years. We could have taken that decision long some time back, and it would have just meant a different place in our life in terms of where we would be. And there's a book called The Defining Decade, which is about this specific topic on how young people should spend their 20s. And I've read it later, and I find it's such a fascinating read. It challenges all these conventions that your 20s are about being footloose and figuring it out. Of course, you should do that,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll only be young once. But if you can be intentional about your life, the earlier the better. I think it just life compounds at a much faster rate, across both personal and professional.
So many lessons here, and I'm gonna check out this book, the last one you said, Decades, definitely. And if money, fame, and attention is not needed anymore, what would you work on?
Yeah, I'm the last person who wants to be famous, so it's very uncomfortable for me. Actually, I'm just in fact thinking of cutting back on social and all of those things. So and even like money doesn't motivate me at all. Like like our lifestyle has not changed a lot at all in the last 3 years. We still live the same way we do, and yeah, I don't think it will. The only new thing I started doing is I started doing a little bit of angel investing, but again, that's coming from that paid forward mindset than really looking at it as a way of creating wealth. I think the thing that motivates me most is to kind of leave some form of legacy behind. That hopefully we left the world a slightly better place than when we set out and what we saw. And that's part of why we converged on this such a niche idea also. Like we feel we like manufacturing because I've seen manufacturing upfront. At ITC, when I set up a new factory, we created 1,000 jobs overnight. And yeah, there'll be services. India will be a services economy, but ultimately, the way to change the lives for the most amount of people, manufacturing is the only way, and it can happen in a much faster time period. And some of those may move to services over a period of time. And to be at this place today, where we have a tiny role to play to catalyze those changes, it feels that I'm a extremely lucky, and b it feels a lot of responsibility to make sure we succeed as a company, and that's what drives us honestly. Like and we have diluted so much of the company through capital that an entrepreneur of a previous generation would not think our moves was very logical, especially when the motivations can be slightly different, right? So for us, wealth creation for the most amount of people, even for our employees, is extremely important for us. That it's not important for just the founders to succeed financially, but how can we take as many people along with us on the journey, and through equity and through the business that we create. How do we create more jobs? How do we create more this sustainable jobs? These things drive us a lot, and they drive me personally also.
Man, loved my conversation with you, Amrit, and I already feel calmer just by talking to you, man. Do you meditate?
I don't. I want to meditate. I did meditate once during my honeymoon. There was,
And why is that so? Only once, and that too on honeymoon?
because the place we went to, they had a good setup, and I I fell into a trance, and I've actually never had that feeling again. And it's a little bit scary also because I kind of completely lost control of my environment. Different headspace, but I've not done that since then, and I want to do it more because yeah, I'm pretty calm in general, but I think I can activate a few more things if I intentionally meditate.
That's awesome. And thanks a lot for, sharing with us your journey, your learnings, your mindset, how you think about things. It was so good. Thank you, Amrit.
All right. Thank you so much.